everybody comfortable for this so we can see what's going on? There's a lot of illustrations this morning. Well, we'll go right to the first order of business here. And that would be the approval of the minutes from back in February. If everybody's had a chance to review those, are there any updates on those minutes, errors, corrections? I guess we'll take it by everybody's silence if there are no errors, corrections, or omissions. This is all new to everybody here, so at least most of us. So if there are none, I'll certainly entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
A motion.
That would be?
Chris.
Sam will second.
Okay. So we have a motion to accept the minutes. It's been seconded. Is there any discussion further? If there's none, everybody, all in favor, indicate by saying aye.
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 Yeah, that's definitely a unanimous sound. So minutes are accepted as printed. Thank you very much. Let's skip right on to the director's report. Eric, you've got lots of information to share with us today.
We do. We have several presentations for you today. Just a little housekeeping. If you are not speaking, please try to mute your microphones so that we can avoid some feedback. And we will we'll go from there. So Anna, let's see. Why don't you bring up the status report first? So the first thing we're going to share is just sort of catch everyone up with what has been occurring over the last couple of months in the entire department, Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, not just tourism specifically, but I think it's important for you all to know what the staff across the board has been working on and doing. So Anna's going to try to bring that up for you. Okay, any way to make that a little bigger? There you go. Okay, on your screens, everyone, if you sort of click on the bottom line where all of the faces are and you drag that up, it will increase the size of your screen. Just FYI. Okay, all right, let's go into the status and program updates here for what was April 23rd when this was created. Next slide, please. Okay, just a quick little timeline, just to remind everyone what has been occurring. So on March 12th, that's when the state of emergency was officially declared. We shortly thereafter closed all the parks and recreation facilities to the public. And the first restrictive order was put forth with limiting gatherings of 50 or less. That was shortly changed to 10 or less on March 17th. On March 17th, the other city facilities closed to the public as well at that same time. On March 19th, we closed all the playgrounds and many of the facilities out in the parks. The stay-at-home order was issued through April 24th on March 22nd. And then April 16th, the stay-at-home order was extended through May 15th. Now, as of yesterday, the governor stated his reopening plan, which actually from a state perspective begins on the 4th, so next week. We are waiting to hear from the city leadership team on what that means for us. We do have staff that is starting to work on some reopening plans. Actually, they have those queued up. We just need to know what kind of restrictions are going to exist for the City of Independence specifically before we go forward and launch those. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the parks in particular, all the restrooms, playgrounds, sport courts, so tennis courts, pickleball courts, the skate park, those are all closed at this point. Baseball and soccer practices and games have been canceled for now. Both soccer is going to forego the spring season, as is softball. We're still working with the Baseball Association to see what they're going to do officially. The dog parks have remained open. People are practicing appropriate social distancing at those facilities, so we've left those open. Again, all the park facilities will reopen as clearance is given, and we're working on that slow rollout plan, hopefully, which will begin next week as soon as we get the clearance from the city manager's office. Staff is also, of course, maintaining appropriate distancing. Crews are out busy mowing, so the park staff is out doing their thing still. We still have to mow, we still have to maintain things, and business as usual, pretty much as far as the Parks Division is concerned. Let's go to the next slide, please. Recreation Division, a little bit different. So all the community centers, the Uptown Market, the nature park facilities are all closed through June 30th. So you'll notice that is beyond what the stay is obviously in place for. That is for budgetary reasons, and we'll cover that here in a little bit. The Adventure Oasis Water Park is also not going to open for the 2020 season. It will reopen spring of 21. All the programs, classes, and events that were scheduled have been canceled right now through June 30th, but we're looking on bringing some of those back in a modified way. All the refunds have been processed for all of the rentals, for all of the facilities and all the classes that we've had to postpone or cancel. Most of the recreation staff is working remotely. We do have one staff member essentially in each building working on site. Next slide, please. Tourism division status. So all the tourism facilities are closed with the staff working remotely. All the marketing plans are being adjusted to the current pandemic situation and planning for the recovery efforts. We'll hear a lot about that here in a little bit. The historic sites right now are all closed. We are working on that reopening plan right now, and we'll share a little bit of that, I think, a little bit later here. All summertime festivals at the historic sites have right now been canceled. That's the National Train Day, Strawberry Festival, the Breakfast in Blooms at Bingham Wagner. So unfortunately, the word that I've got from our various different operators at those facilities is those events have been canceled. Rentals at historic sites and National Frontier Trails Museum have been canceled again through June 30th for budgetary reasons. Right now, the National Frontier Trails Museum will remain closed for the remainder of this fiscal year, and we are talking about next fiscal year when that might reopen as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the experiential history program has been postponed until further notice. Next slide, please. As far as the arena, that facility is closed to the public as well, including the community ice side. All of the scheduled events, programs, and classes have been canceled or rescheduled for later dates. Ticketmaster is refunding all of the concert tickets and event tickets that have been purchased for events that were canceled. Some of the staff over there have been furloughed, which is very unfortunate. The facility had been placed on a soft standby status for a field hospital site. We spent a lot of time working with SEMA, with the Corps of Engineer and the National Guard to stand that facility up as a field hospital for overflow for our local hospitals. Fortunately, that was just a week and a half ago. We were told to stand down on that, which is good. So now we switched over there to a secondary role, which is a testing site, which we are actually doing today and tomorrow for some first responders. And it's also been deemed a local distribution site by the state for the distribution of any testing kits and things of that nature that may come in bulk. We'll unload them there, store them in our back of house area, and then prep those for distribution out to the community. The naming rights is going forward. So for those of you that didn't get the press release a little while back before all of this hit, Cable Dahmer is going to be our new naming rights partner there. So it is going to be Cable Dahmer Arena. They're actively changing out the signage on the interior of the facility now The exterior of the building will be next here in the next few weeks. We also took advantage of the downtime to repair a couple of leaks in the underfloor refrigerant system that serves both the community ice side as well as the main bowl side. Next slide, please. I'll also state that as far as concerts and things of that nature, most promoters are not even looking until February of 21 to actually start booking things again. So I'm sure we'll still have hockey going on. They're still planning on gearing things up in October again. But as far as concerts, things of that nature, we might get a few more in there, but most of the promoters are really looking to 21 before they rebook. Okay, any questions on the current status of any of the facilities or programs?
Hey, Eric.
Yes.
Sorry, Eric. Yeah, I interrupted you there. This is Sam. So when you say that the slow rollout is going to occur for some of the parks programs, is that meaning before May 15? So even before, because it appears that May 15 is still the kind of the operative date as far as I know for, the city to reopen. But does that sound like, maybe things can roll out sooner?
There's a distinct possibility of that. There's conversation taking place at Mid-America Regional Council and what's called the MAC, which is a coordinated effort of all the different counties and cities that have come together to try to be consistent on what we're doing across boundaries. They are reviewing the governor's lift at this point and taking it into consideration to see if we might be able to go a little bit sooner on some things than the 15th. I hope to hear a little bit more specifics later today. And like I said, staff is already gearing up and trying to get ready to go to hopefully open up a few things a little bit earlier than the 15th, but that still remains to be seen. So we're actively working on that. The one thing that we've learned through this whole pandemic scenario is information and directives don't just change day to day, they literally change hour to hour. So we have had to be, as much as we tried to be proactive, we have been put in a very reactive type of scenario. So we're just waiting for the word. Let's put it that way. We're prepping and ready to go. We don't know quite for sure.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's go to the ESF 6 TO, if we could, please. Okay, so your Parks, Recreation, and Tourism staff have a secondary role with the city. We are, as part of the Emergency Operations Center plan, we are part of the overall response effort, specifically when it comes to mass care. That's our role within a citywide response is doing mass care scenarios for our public. So we shifted into this role about a week and a half after the state of emergency was officially declared. This obviously situation was a little bit bigger than a localized emergency scenario, like a tornado or something of that nature might be. So the response plan was a little bit bigger as well. So instead of just being city specific, this is regional. So this particular table of organization and our mass care response has been for Eastern Jackson County, not just for the City of Independence. So here's what that looks like, and here's the organizational structure that we've been working under as a secondary role to our normal jobs here for the past 4 or 5 weeks or so. So we'll start with what this is. So this is the table of organization that shows the coordinated response for mass care and all of its different components. So I'm the branch director for what's called ESF, which is Emergency Support Function 6. 6 stands for mass care in the overall emergency response world. Jody Nguyen, the recreation manager for Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, is the branch director. And then the box below that is really the one who has done most of the legwork and just a tremendous job of coordinating everything. That's Meredith Parrish. She's with the Independent School District. Luckily, I guess, well, at least for us, she has an incredible amount of experience in these type of mass care type of responses. She was involved with Katrina and a couple of others as well in this kind of role. So she has been a wealth of information and has just done a terrific job. We've got Roman Davis right underneath her direct line there. He's the lead planner. He works with the city, and he's done a fantastic job as well, getting things coordinated and communicated. But underneath that umbrella, then we have child feeding, which is the school districts essentially. They're working to make sure that all of the students, when they were out of school, are still getting their lunches. On the other side, we have volunteer management. Lindsay Brown from Truman Habitat is the lead organizer for volunteers. Those volunteers are working, we're working with AmeriCorps to be able to pull trained volunteers in case we need them for any particular event or any of the different functions that you see down below. So that is sort of our pool of resource for additional help. Going back to the left, then you have your mass feeding task force. So unlike the child feeding strike team, the mass feeding task force is for the general public. This is food pantries and things of that nature. Doug Cowan with CSL is the lead on that. Our Communications and Citizens Awareness Task Force, led by Meg Lewis, who is our city PIO. She has been putting out a tremendous amount of information on a daily basis. She's been very busy with this. Then the Housing and Emergency Sheltering Task Force, that's basically Parks and Recreation and Tourism. Jody Wynn is our lead for the city there. Then you'll notice just off to the right, underneath Jody there, you'll see your tourism staff. That's Christy and Matea. So they have been very busy working at various different stages throughout this event with our lodging folks. First, they were working to secure a couple of floors for emergency responders that needed to be isolated or otherwise needed to be housed outside of their homes. Either they think they might have come in contact, they didn't want to take anything home, or they did come in contact and they're in an incubation period or something of that nature. So they worked to secure some housing for those folks successfully. Then they flipped into more of the mass lodging scenarios while we were working with the state to potentially stand up the field hospital. So they were prepping the hotels to receive all the different folks that would be coming into town for that. First would have been construction workers. Literally, they were looking at bringing in contractors to build a hospital within the arena. It was quite the undertaking. It was fast moving, of course, as you can imagine. So we would have needed a lot of housing and lodging for those folks. Then as soon as they moved out, the next group would have moved in, which is some of the healthcare providers that would have been brought in to help stand it up and actually support and run the field hospital, as well as the cleaning crews and things of that nature. And then, of course, the last group of people would be people that would have been coming in to stay at a hotel close to the arena if one of their if they knew someone that was being actually treated in there and they wanted to be close. So could have been a really big deal, and we were really close to having to pull that trigger. Literally everything was set, ready to go, passed through the governor's office. The only thing left was for FEMA to sign the check to pay for all of that. And just before that, within a day of that happening, we got the call to stand down, that the trend analysis showed that the hospitals were not going to need any overflow scenarios. So a lot of work was put into it. Fortunately, I guess we didn't have to pull that off, but they did a great job lining everything out. The next box over is Mental Health Task Force. That one is still pretty darn active. They've got a call center that has been set up, as well as a lot of social media resources that are there directing people on where to get assistance if they're struggling mentally with dealing with the whole pandemic scenario. And then you have your Human Resources Task Force underneath that, which is a lot more of the outreach type of programming and things of that nature with Christina Leakey and Jennifer with CSL. So they too are very, very busy at this point, working out in the community to make sure people are steered in the right direction when they need help. So that's been our secondary role. We are basically starting with, except for the mental health and the human services standpoint, child feeding is still going as well. A lot of these areas are starting to wind down as we start to look and transition into the reopening plan. All right, any questions about what your staff has been doing with ESF6? Okay, let's move to the Parks and Recreation table of organization, please. Okay, there's been just some very slight changes in our table of organization as we look both at current operations as well as next year's budget. Most notably is in the area of oversight for the historic sites. We've got a lot of transition and some planning that needs to take place with some of the historic site operations, National Frontier Trails Museum in particular, since we have so many folks or so many vacant positions that are there at the moment. So, because as you will see in a moment, we don't have much in the way of projects. We're getting a lot of feedback. So just a reminder to folks that they could mute their microphones while we're going through here so we can avoid some background noise. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so so as you'll see here in a moment, we are not planning much in the way of any capital projects for anything under Parks, Recreation, Tourism, or the arena for the next coming year. The Assistant Director of PRT, Morris Heidi, he was pretty much our project manager for all of that activity. So he now, with that not going forward as much, he's going to have a little bit more time to help focus some of the work that needs to be done in and around the historic sites. So we're going to put that work group underneath his leadership at this point to try to move a couple of initiatives that we can afford forward and help some of that new staff come in on board and work through some of those historic site issues that we've had on the table for a little bit, in particular with the National Frontier Trails Museum. Other than that, everything in the TO is the same, which let's talk about budget a little bit, and then we'll talk about some of those vacant positions as part of that presentation. Okay, first part of the budget I want to talk about is the remainder of this fiscal year. So next slide, please. So what we heard early on, as soon as the pandemic hit, our finance department did trend analysis, and we quickly figured out that we were going to have to put the brakes on quite a few things this fiscal year, so that we could adjust to the drop in revenue that was caused by businesses closing and travel basically coming to a screeching halt. You can see by fund, that's general fund, Parks and Recreation sales tax fund, transient guest tax fund. You can see what we looked at as far as new targets are concerned. So if you add all of those up, that's a little over $1 million that we needed to come up with in the fourth quarter of this fiscal year. So as you can imagine, after you've already spent through 3 quarters and all of a sudden got smacked in the face with $1 million budget cut, that was pretty difficult to do. So the next slides that we're going to go through is going to illustrate essentially how we were able to accomplish that and what some of the effects were of coming up with that $1 million here in the fourth quarter. Okay, so we not only had to consider the tax revenue that we were going to be losing, but with facilities closed and programs canceled and things of that nature, we also had revenue loss on top of that we had to add. So you can see the first column is just your tax revenue loss, total just over $1 million, and then you have to add $74,000 on top of that to accommodate the total revenue picture. So we achieved that through basically 3 different ways: operational reductions, capital project deferment, and then what was left, we had to dip into the fund balance for each of the different funds. So in essence, from overall operational cuts, and we'll go through those a little bit in detail, we were able to cut $208,000 out of this fiscal year. We deferred capital projects, which was almost another $200,000, but that still left us with a little over $700,000 that we had to dip into fund balances to cover, both in the Parks and Recreation Sales Tax Fund and the Transient Guest Tax Fund, respectively. Next slide, please. For the general fund, we held one of our vacant positions, or one of our positions that we had vacant, held that vacant for the rest of this fiscal year. We closed the Sermon Center through the end of the month, or the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And there was a savings, obviously, to operations, but unfortunately, center attendants were not scheduled then, obviously, as the facility was closed, resulting in some salary savings there. And then we shifted 25% of the salary for the staff assistant to the Transient Guest Tax Fund, as we didn't have any reserves in the general fund scenario. And it is apportioned to the work that Tamara, our staff assistant, actually does for the tourism department. Tourism division, we just never really quantified that before and then charged it appropriately. We took the opportunity to do that as a result of needing to reduce some general fund. Next slide, please. Okay, Parks and Recreation Sales Tax Fund was hit pretty hard. Closed the Truman Memorial Building and the Palmer Senior Center through the rest of this fiscal year. We canceled some of the communication pieces that we were sending out to our seniors. We canceled a lot of classes and special events, things of that nature. Some other contracts were canceled. And then the Uptown Market and the Palmer Center, both they're seeing CA savings through May 15th. Those are the facilities that we still have some people working at, or will have working at. The Palmer Senior Center is still delivering meals to folks that used to come into the Palmer Center for lunch every day. We're working with the Mid-America Regional Council, and staff is actually receiving frozen meals at this point and then delivering those out to over 200 folks every other week. And then the market, we still left money in there to potentially bring staff, some center attendant staff in after the May 15th. That's one facility that we may still be able to do some programming in because of the nature and setup of the facility and the ability to easily control the number of people in the social gathering spaces that will probably be required once the stay is lifted. And then we deferred all the capital projects scheduled for this spring, which was quite a few. Okay, then the one that you're probably most interested in, the Transient Guest Tax Fund, is next. Okay, so we closed the National Frontier Trails Museum from April 1 through June 30. We'll talk about the additional closures beyond that. We had 3 positions that were vacant at the museum. We held those vacant through the end of this fiscal year as well. And as we mentioned before, the experiential history program has been canceled through the end of this fiscal year as well. And the few capital projects that we did have that were being paid for by the transient guest tax have been deferred. Okay, so the result of all of that was a savings of just over $1 million for the remainder of this fiscal year, with the addition of some of the fund balance that we use to cover the gap. And that's going to get us through the end of this fiscal year and still be in the black. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so at the same time that we were doing that, we were also having to come up with adjustments to the budget proposal that we had put together just a week before all of this hit, to adjust for some of the new revenue projections, which are lower than what we had originally assumed when we built the budget proposal originally. So the overall revenue is projected for our new general fund, which is the Health and Recreation Fund. We're only looking at a 1% decrease there because it's property tax related. So a $26,000 reduction was needed there. And then hopefully we're only going to see a 5% reduction, which is what the financial experts are telling us to expect, which is about $100,000 less in the transient guest tax fund. But I think that we've taken the approach that's more conservative than that, especially with the transient guest tax, because as I've said before, the only funding source that tourism has as an entire division is the transient guest tax, which typically generates $1.9 to $2 million a year. And that's it. So everything that occurs underneath that tourism division has to draw upon those revenues in order to fund its operations and its staffing scenarios. So what you're going to see here in a little bit is a plan that really puts us on a path to make sure that we're going to be sustainable until we figure out what the sales tax revenue is actually going to be. So we'll be watching it month to month, and we'll look at those trends to see how quickly it's going to return, or if it's going to plateau at a lower level than what we had originally anticipated, build our fund balance back up, which is something that I've been preaching for years to this group and to others. It's critically important that we had a healthy fund balance, which thankfully we did going into this recent state of emergency. And that is really what's carrying the water for us presently. So let's move forward, please. Next slide. Okay, again, we put together the original proposal and then we adjusted it as follows. Essentially, we cut from the transient guest tax another 100,000. Plus, we are looking at probably about $22,000 in additional program loss. We made operational reductions of $207,000, capital project deferments of almost $84,000. So you'll see that those two numbers are bigger than what the projected loss was going to be or is going to be. But again, we're treating this as extremely, this is an extremely conservative approach to make sure that that tax and the guests actually are returning at a rate that the experts are telling us that they will. So the result of that is a positive impact on the fund balance of $170,000 to the transient guest tax. So again, trying to build some of that reserve back up. Okay, next slide, please.
Eric, question. Can we ask questions? I don't want to break your stride here.
No, go ahead.
How comfortable are you with that 5% reduction? I mean, everything I know experts giving you that information. I mean, like you say, everything changes on an hourly basis, but that seems really conservative based upon things I'm hearing from across the country.
I think it's overly optimistic, which is why we are cutting almost twice as much as that. And some of the reasons for some of the holdbacks that you're going to see here in the next couple of slides. Really, we're kind of putting the brakes on most everything until the first of the year, until January of 21, to really gauge 6 months of this recovery, and then go from there. So I think I think it's overly optimistic to think that it's only going to be 5%. I hope I'm wrong, but
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, we're budgeting as if it's going to be worse than that. So,
Yeah.
Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just as FYI, in the sales tax fund, you see some of the decreases there that we made. The biggest note probably for this group is just the note again that the water park is not going to open this summer. We did some pretty heavy analysis on that, and we make our hay in June. So essentially, once we hit July, the expenses of operating the water park exceed the revenues that we're bringing in at that point. Our peak time is definitely June. So once we get to that next fiscal year in July, it is a subsidy scenario for the water park, and we were not in the financial position to absorb that this upcoming fiscal year. So overall for a season, if you look at it as a season, the pool does just fine financially. But if you split it out into fiscal years, the second half of the pool season, as I stated, is a subsidy scenario. And we just weren't ready to absorb that. Not to mention, we just weren't quite sure when we could open, and employing the staff in a moment's notice to program that. We need over 100 lifeguards for that facility to be employed, and it was a lot to pull off in a short amount of time. That, given the financial situation, the decision was made to not open that pool for this year. We are not alone. There are other pools around the metropolitan area that are following suit and will also not open. Some will with a modified season scenario, and others that have multiple pool scenarios. Some of your larger cities, Kansas City, etc., will be opening one pool instead of three, for example. So we are not alone in adjusting our water park operations for this next coming year. And then a lot of capital projects were deferred well into the future, except for park maintenance, mobile equipment. We still have some lease payments to make on some equipment that we purchased previously, and park revitalization, which is sort of the fix-it accounts. That one is fully funded as well. Moving forward, please. Okay, transient guest tax. Whoops, you probably want to cover that. Let's go back one. There we go. Okay, transient guest tax. So the budget right now calls for the National Frontier Trails Museum to remain closed until January of 2021. Same thing with those positions that we have vacant. We have 3 positions vacant. We're not looking to bring those on until that time as well. So again, this is the approach of being very conservative, to take a look at that 6-month trend to see where the transient guest tax is actually going to fall and what the revenues are going to be going forward. So at this point, the plan is to not open the museum for the first 6 months of the fiscal year and save some salary dollars as a result of that as well. We've also, as a result of that, obviously reduced a lot of operating costs associated with the museum. That's in the 3rd bullet point there, including the experiential history program that we're also not looking to gear up and re-energize that until 2021 as well. And then we did defer some more capital projects except for historic site rehab, which is the fix-it account, much like the parks revitalization account. This is the money that does all the little fixes around the sites. And the Truman Depot, that project is still moving forward because it was a grant scenario. Again, we got a $350,000 grant. We do have $80,000 in matching funds that we left in the budget that was required by that grant. But we didn't want to turn back $350,000 at this point. So we did keep that program match funded, and we're moving forward with that. It is still slated to open in the fall, hopefully lining up with the Truman Library's reopening. All right, so questions about any of the budgetary stuff?
Hey, Eric, on that subject, before I forget, yeah, the Truman Library is still moving forward with plans to reopen this fall. We're using fall as our operative word now, but that's still in the works.
Well, that's good news, Sam. And as dark and depressing as my presentation was, the good news is to this point we haven't laid off any staff. People are still working, and we are positioning ourselves to still serve our visitors and our community appropriately as the department was set up to do, although be it on a modified basis for a little while. But we've set forth a plan of recovery for this next year. So hopefully when 2021 comes back, we'll be back in full force. So again, it's conservative. It's it's a tough road. There's no question about it. But this is why we fought so hard to keep our reserves where they were, and be able to withstand some of the economic downturns that we're going to be experiencing here over the next year.
So Eric, this is Russ Cannon. What about Bingham, Wagner, and Vale? Do we have an estimate on when we think they'll open?
Yeah, I can tell you what we're working on at this point, and again, it's still a little bit of a moving target. So keep that in mind. This is not an official announcement by any means, but we, after discussing with city manager's office yesterday, we're hoping for an opening of our volunteer operated historic sites in June.
Okay. We are also looking at June, maybe mid-June, for opening the Independence Visitor Center for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Very good. Thank you for that info. We'll try to sync that up. Good. All right, Jim, I'm pretty talked out, so I'm going to kick it over to Christy, who's going to talk to us about our STR and air DNA reports.
Thank you, Eric.
Christy? Your mic is muted. There you go.
Okay, there we go. It looks like our February STR and the air DNA reports were actually pretty good for February. This year versus last year, we were up 4.7% in our occupancy. We were up 9.9% in our RevPAR, and then let's see, and then ADR was up 5%. So that was great. And then the air DNA, the supply nights were at 77.8% change from last year increase. Demand night were up 66.7%, and the revenue from last year was up 39.2%. And then we get into the STR for March, and let's see, that was down 26.7%. And while that sounds absolutely terrible, when you look at Kansas City, they were down 42.7%, and let's see, in Branson was down 54.1%. So all in all, that was not as bad as we thought it was going to be, but we haven't seen April yet. So we will keep our fingers crossed it's not as bad as we think. And then the air DNA report, the supply nights up from last year was 73.3%, and demand nights were up 56.3%. The revenue was down, but only 1.7%. But I can tell you from the various calls and meetings that we have been sitting on, the talk is that when people do start traveling again, they will probably be staying in hotels because they feel more confident. The cleanliness standards, etc., they just have more confidence in that. But with that being said, Airbnb actually released some cleaning standards. I think it was yesterday or maybe over the weekend, that are asking their people to go 72 hours between rentals. So that was definitely a change from that. But as far as the STR and the air DNA reports, I mean, they are what they are, but we'll see what happens for April. Does anybody have any questions on those?
Yeah, the psychology, that's interesting, Christy. I would have thought it'd be the opposite, you know, that people would feel more comfortable in a smaller space with fewer people around, but that's interesting. Is that based on a study or something we've seen?
Yeah, it is actually based on different studies. We've been on calls with the Division of Tourism for the state. We've been on calls with Madden, and that's all the research that's going around out there, that people are a little bit more comfortable staying in hotels.
Thank you.
Sure.
Division staffing, Christy?
Well, that was kind of covered in Eric's report.
Anything to add?
We're just working really hard to try to keep everybody busy and making sure that we are ready when we get when our visitors do start coming back.
Great, super, thank you.
That's a nice segue into the next and last bullet point underneath the director's report. So we are turning our attention a lot more towards the future, and there is a future. We're going to make it through this. We're going to be okay, and people are going to start traveling again, and we need to be cognizant of the fact that we need to start getting on people's radars now. Now that stays are starting to get lifted and people start thinking about getting out of the house, we need to get in front of them and remind them of what we have here to offer this summer. And our marketing group has been working diligently to do just that. They put, if you haven't seen it, and I hope that you did, but if you haven't seen it, the Madden folks put together a really great video that was basically a stay home message scenario, and when you're ready, we're here for you. It was gave me goosebumps. It was really, really great. And if you haven't seen that, Christy, hopefully you can direct folks on where to go to take a look at that. But with that said, let's hear about what we are looking to do here from a marketing perspective and looking at that sort of summer welcome back campaign. So I'll turn it over to Madden Media at this point.
Hi guys, good to see you all. It's Kim with Madden. I also have Ryan on the call here today. But I just kind of want to give you a recap. What we've been doing this first quarter was not what we had planned on doing, obviously. However, we had got quite a bit of work done for what we were planning for a typical spring summer launch campaign. And then, as you know, the COVID hit, and we had a lot of cancellations, including baseball, March Mania, those types of things. But we went ahead and continued to work on what we would feel would be a typical spring summer campaign, and we've built out a lot of ads and built up a digital campaign. And then we've also turned a 360 to stop and work on recovery ads. So as we internally plan for independence and recovery, we've done a lot of research at Madden. We've collected a lot of data from different sources and varying research companies that we work with, as well as looking at our own information as we work with cities all across the country. So before we go into exactly what we're doing, I kind of want to turn it over to Ryan to talk about some of the research that we've done. We also had conducted a visitor profile study, so we just want to address those two things pretty high level quickly, and then we can talk a little bit about what we're seeing for the next 60 days.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. Like Kim said, we did a visitor profile study that we executed, and really what this does is we work with a company that uses cell phone data device through third-party applications on your phone. So obviously when you download an app on your phone and it gives you all that lovely 25 pages of fine print and you don't want to read it and you just hit accept, some of those things you're accepting to is being able to be tracked by the data, and third-party people can actually buy that information. Now, it doesn't buy your name or anything of that nature or any personal information. It just buys a unique ID device that is registered with your phone that nobody can figure out exactly who you are. But it does allow us to sit there and decipher out who our guests are. It gives a good sample size. I believe in this one, we had a little over 133,000 devices that were registered between 2018 and 2019. So this company is actually really able to go retroactive, and we're able to look back over 2 years and try to see and get some good sense of measurement. Obviously, it's not holistically. We wish that our destination had a gate that somebody had to pay to get into, or at least say, hey, here's what I'm here for. That would be ideal at destination marketing because it would be the easiest way to track visitors. But lo and behold, we just have what we have to work with. But it is good anecdotal information that can help drive your marketing and support the efforts that you have been doing. So as we look at the origin market, and drive markets versus out of state, I'll kind of just go high level because there's a lot to go over between this and another presentation that we have. That everything year over year from 18 to 19 is a little similar. There's a little increase that we see in Illinois and Michigan as we step into 2019. But the out-of-state visitors, obviously, you see from 19 to Kansas, Illinois, Texas, Florida, Nebraska are among the highest travel to markets to visit independents. There could be correlation. We don't know reasons why these trips or why things have increased. And that's really, you guys live and breathe the destination every day. It could be different conferences that were hosted. It could be just a construction company having more business to do there. But these are just kind of the trends that we're seeing. You can scroll down to the next part in the emerging markets. The biggest growth in visitation that we saw in 2019, Michigan, Illinois, and Wisconsin. Michigan was up 17% year over year, so it's a pretty big increase. But like I said, we do not know the actual reason why there would be an increase for Michigan. Again, these are just things we try to sit there and trends we try to track. There's another thing we'll do at another time that we did points of interest, that we were able to take the top points of interest within the destination and see how people are engaging with those points of interest, whether it be the Truman Library, the Truman House, the Independence Square, and we set out, I believe 10 points of interest, but we'll cover that another time because it's a pretty deep dive. So those are the three emerging markets that we had for 2019. You can scroll down to the next one. The behavior report doesn't change year over year. They break these up into these funky named categories, we didn't name these categories. So fast foodies, business travelers, and pet owners are the ones with the highest propensity to visit independents. I think the thing that you look at the most here is 2019, the breakup of visitors between a day trip and overnight. That the average person, if they stayed overnight, that they stay for 1 day and 8 hours, and it's a little 14% reduction from 2018. But it just lets you know that people are coming in there for a specific event or a specific thing and typically leaving. Again, this is a skewed number because this is only based on the cell phone data that we're are able to get, not the holistic look at the entire visitor to independence. So then you scroll down a little more, and then we just look at the demographic analysis. It starts to pull these things based on the information provided by the city, as well as some of the demographic information you can pull from visitors to take an average. So these are probably not things that shock you and that kind of make up the fabric of the community as far as the demographic standpoint goes, between their household income and the age. And the education, and then obviously just the mix of the race for the community. That is an extreme high-level overview of going over this. I did do this in depth, and we went over the entire report as well as the points of interest report with Christy and her team. And what this allows us to do, it's hard to really talk the whole strategy here, but it allows us to take a deeper dive and make sure that when we're targeting audiences, that we're targeting the right audiences and really focusing on the people that have the highest propensity to want to visit Independence. It allows us, to have instead of using a shotgun approach and really just kind of spreading our message all over, it allows us to smartly target the key demographic areas as well as the regional information. So if we know, hey, there's not a lot of people from California or these certain areas, we can actually hone in on these specific areas, do a deeper dive into Michigan. Why is Michigan up so high? Where are the areas in Michigan that are up so high? And we can actually focus our marketing on there. And thankfully in digital marketing, we can do it pretty quickly, test it, see if it works. If it works, then, we'll keep going. If it doesn't, then we can pull back that tactic and shift to something else. Any questions on this quick snapshot? Okay, then. Well, we're on to the finish line, and I know Eric's gone over a lot, and so I think when he said there was a lot of visuals today, he wasn't kidding. But this is going to be the last one, so I know it's been a long morning already. This is really an aggregate of data that we've collected from different partners that we work with across the country that are representative of the research partners in our industry, specifically to destination marketing, that we'll go through here, and some of the trends that we're seeing. This data, like you guys know and you've talked about already this morning, this changes on a regular basis. So by the time we even submitted this, I know some things have changed. So as I pull those slides, I have the other updated slides, so I'll probably reference those. They're the same graphs. They just may have newer information. But this is really kind of the quick overview, and we did a webinar for the state of Missouri last week that Cristiano and her team were on, but this is kind of a drill down version of that, so I will try to go through this as succinctly as possible and give you guys the information, but also reference any new information that we've collected from our partners. So if you'll move on to the next slide, please. These are the expected short-term consumer travel trends that we're expecting to see, and just also want to let you guys know that I also did some of these slides last week with the Independence Hotel Lodging Association, and so they've had this information as well as of last week. But just some of the quick trends that you're seeing is that we're seeing an overall shift from densely populated areas, and that probably does not come as a surprise to anybody that the more affected areas tend to be the higher the populated areas, your LAs, your Dallas-Fort Worth area, your obviously New York being hit, but that people are going to want to stay away from those types of areas and attractions. Obviously sporting events and concerts, like Eric mentioned, are not going to be happening anytime soon. So people are going to be looking to shift their experiences to find the most open area that they possibly can, as well as trying to get just away from the overall mess of a highly densely populated area. The older demographics, to no surprise, are going to be the slower to return with the travel restrictions. There is some research out there that actually the older demographics, it's kind of going against it, and I need to get more information on it, but that the older demographics will actually start to get back on the road quicker than perhaps younger families to get out and see their loved ones. So there's more to come on that, and we'll kind of, like I said, everything keeps changing. So we'll always stay abreast of that and share any information with Christy and her team on how those patterns change. The next one, not a surprise either, that cruise passengers are going to be looking for new opportunities as they've had to cancel their travel plans. Looking for similar planning, if they can get outdoor lakes and get that water adventure, but obviously without the crowds. And then again, we talked about it just a minute ago about the people's likelihood of shifting from a hotel to a vacation rental or an Airbnb type property. The reasoning behind that is, especially if you do not fly a major flag from one of the major brands, a Hilton, a Marriott, that people have concerns about the safety protocols and procedures that are going to be put in their properties. So I advise the Independence Hotel Lodging Association, if that is you, that you are clearly communicating to consumers what your protocols and what your safety procedures are going to be moving forward to ensure your guest safety. because that's going to become first and foremost. And I've also talked to Christy and her team about how Visit Independence can actually share that message out and be transparent and letting people know how attractions are safe, how the properties are safe, and restaurants as things come back online. Obviously, the theme parks will try to see what they do. I don't know if you saw the news here from yesterday here in Texas that there's going to be slow openings and the phased tier approach, and I think you'll start to see that more commonly as some of these states urge to reopen. But I know theme parks, with them being majority outside, how they're going to handle their reopenings. And then we're going to start seeing the smaller group travel return, hopefully to our hotels, that we get that, that corporate road warrior that maybe he's been pent up in his house for 2 months and ready to get back out on the road, that they'll start making those travel trips again. And that we see smaller family reunions and weddings taking place of people whose plans were shifted, but maybe they can, shift to a bed and breakfast where they can have just some of the close immediate family, come have their wedding and get everybody back together.
Hey, Ryan, can I jump in here for 1 second, please?
Yeah.
Regarding the hotels versus the home rentals or vacation rentals, we were on a call yesterday with the Missouri Division of Tourism, and they had some conflicting information on that. So I know, like you said, with the seniors and traveling first or not, and I've also heard millennials are scared to travel. So we are seeing conflicting information. This is probably, though, these trends are what we've gathered and are the most research we've seen. But like everybody keeps saying, it is changing daily. So we'll update these as we can. So there is, I just want to point out, there is some conflicting information on the hotels and the vacation rentals as well.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, to Kim's point again, it's an ever-changing target, and you get different research from different resources, and everybody kind of, I think we've all seen, everybody almost thinks they're an expert at something at some point during this whole pandemic. So we just try to aggregate the best and the highlights and share with everybody what we see. If you move on to the next one, please. Okay, so this one actually has changed. This was the slide you're seeing is from April 10th through the 12th. And this company, Destination Analyst, was a highly reputable company that does destination research. They've actually added in, as of last week, the 17th through the 19th, the traveler perceptions of safety. Now, the categories are kind of all of the same. They've, except there's some changes here, is cruises is still at the top. But what they've done now is when they're surveying these people, they're asking them not just unsafe, are you worried about it? Does it scare you? Now they're doing 2 categories, very unsafe to somewhat unsafe. And traveling on a cruise line has actually jumped up to 72% saying they feel very unsafe to the idea of hopping on a cruise ship right now. And then 11% are saying somewhat unsafe. And then the next one, which is a little harder to deal with, is sporting events in a large venue. 62% of the people surveyed said they still feel very unsafe going to a large sporting event, and almost 19% said that they feel somewhat unsafe. And then when you start going down the categories from there, it's pretty much all the ones that you're seeing on your slide. Is the areas hit hard by the coronavirus and places with hygiene and sanitary issues, as well as traveling outside the United States to any foreign destinations. And then a conference, attending a big convention or a conference, and then you see air travel up on there. The one thing that people have said that they're not too worried about, the least in this new study, was actually taking a road trip. So it actually is going to benefit the regional destinations, that if you are a drive market, which Independence is, that people are going to be, antsy to get out of their houses, play it safe, but also get out and get to experience something. So the drive markets are going to be the ones that are going to see the rebound the quickest, as opposed to any of the major metropolitan areas. All right, if you move on to the next slide, please. This is the traveler sentiment. They should be coming out probably sometime this morning, actually an updated one for last week. But this is through a company called Longwoods International, which is very similar to Destinations Analyst. They do more economic impact studies, but they also do a lot of research as well. And they've polled 1,000 people ever since the pandemic was officially named a pandemic about their travel plans and then some other things within the next 6 months. So you see a little trickle down all the way to April 1st, and then a small but steady increase from April 8th to the 15th. I'm expecting a small decrease in this as the numbers have increased in cases and deaths significantly. And, if you look at between April 1st and today, the amount of deaths that have increased in the United States and the cases, I wouldn't be shocked to see a bigger drop off, maybe 2 to 3 points on this study. I can actually pull this and see if they've done it for you, just to give you the latest, because they do post at 10 a.m. Okay, yes, it's actually dropped to 69% for April 22nd on their next 6 months in their travel sentiment about how are they wanting to get out and travel over the next 6 months. So you move on to the next slide, please. Okay, this is something that we've created, and this is something that we're sharing out. Now, this isn't something that when we do these webinars, we're really trying to just be a source of information for destinations, not necessarily, hey, this is our plan, you should buy this and buy it from us. That's not what we want to be doing right now. We want to be a source of information for every destination. And this is kind of what we've pitched to everybody, and we've said, hey, this is what we're seeing and the time it takes to get a campaign going. Now, we are working with our clients, like Christy and her team, on these messages. So, spending the time right now to really focus and hone in on the right audiences. That's why the visitor profile study, getting that information helps, but that we can adjust our messaging. So, at this time we were looking at doing, and I wish we still were, because I wish baseball was going, we were looking at doing a whole baseballs and food and brews push out to to our market to try to get them to come in, stay in Independence, and go to a game and experience the best of the food and brew scene in Independence. Well, we've had to change that messaging, and now we're really focusing on outdoors and saying, here's the attractions that you can do outdoors, and the things that still follow CDC guidelines of social distancing, and just playing it safe. So we're working on that campaign creative in the media planning. Now, all this is going to be based on the time of when the community is ready to open. So whether that's the state that's dictating it, the county, or the municipality, this is kind of a moving target as far as a date, but the timeline to spend 30 less days getting that going, honing it in, and getting it out there, but then getting the optimization and the reporting done so we can actually see how people are engaging with the message, what they think about it. Are they going to this site? How much time are they spending? And really kind of optimizing things from there to then move on to phase 2, which is, okay, we've done this plan now, visit later message, but we need to get people actually back in the destination, and the government's opened things back up, that we need to immediately focus on the occupancy improvement and getting people back into the hotels post-COVID, and really trying to sit there and, can we get people in the hotels, and, can we take that 1 day and 8 hour time frame and boost it to getting people to stay for 2 days? You get people to go from a 1-night trip to a 2-night trip. It's a pretty significant increase as you look at things. So that should be the next focus on how we're getting people into the community and staying in the hotels, but then focusing on the yield expansion. How are we improving the ADR? The average daily rate has gone down significantly in every community since this pandemic hit. And that's going to be the hardest thing to recover from anybody, whether you're a big meetings destination or just a transient and leisure destination. Getting your ADR back up is going to be hard, because people are also going to be wanting to focus on finding budget opportunities. But at the same time, you need to get those sales tax dollars and those transient tax dollars back into the community and get people to stay at the hotels, get them back in those restaurants, and get that money flowing back into the community. If you go to the next slide, please. This is something that we utilize all the time that really is the anchor of what we try to pitch to people when we talk about the consumer journey and how people interact with destinations. So it goes all the way from this awareness you see to advocacy, that they get made aware of the destination, they're inspired to visit the destination, they really consider it. they make the trip, and then they become advocates of the destination because they were there and had a good experience. So this is kind of the consumer journey and the cycle that repeats. And you see here in the current environment that pre-COVID, that people engaged 43 days, 116 minutes, and used 56 different digital touch points really before deciding when and how to make a trip. So this is kind of in the current environment. So what we've done is kind of extrapolate that information and sit there and say, hey, if we had a little sped up timeline for arrivals, you see April 19th, if you wanted to have June 1st arrivals, that you would already need to be out in the market and have marketing out there to get ahead. And to get this in front of people, because we know travel searches are up because people are at home and they have a lot of nothing to do outside of watching TV and probably playing on their phones, that they're daydreaming about getting back out on the road and making a trip. And so you see the correlation to the corresponding dates of May 19th for July 1 arrival, June 19th for an August 1 arrival. So this is kind of the booking window consideration of, hey, this is when I should have stuff out in the market, and that we'll start focusing on the marketing efforts. And this is a date I know that we're targeting is kind of the middle of May, currently for Independence, that we can start getting that outdoor message, that plan now, visit later message started, and start the path to recovery. So if you go to the next one, please. And then this is just kind of the same thing, just kind of reimagined a little bit about what people are wanting to see. They're wanting, to see that park, that outdoors, that family, not crowded group shots, but really families engaging in that outdoors, parks imagery. They're wanting to see different itineraries that the destination has to offer. What are the stories? What are the unique selling points for the destination? They're bundling and packages put together. And then also the emotion. Eric talked about the video that we released, and you've seen multiple companies do videos like that, different brands, different destinations, but I really think it evokes the emotion of people within the community, the sense of pride in the community, but as well to the visitor, to show that, yes, there's some uncertainty about everything, but that people do care, and that when the destination is ready, they're going to be ready to welcome people back with open arms. But also, this is also focusing on, making sure that you still engage visitors on a daily basis through social media, but also get your residents fired back up and get them excited to welcome visitors back into the destination. Go to the next one, please. And then this one is really just, this last slide is just talking about, this is from Oxford Economics, which is another destination marketing research firm that solely focuses on data. They really don't do intercept surveys or anything of that nature, but they've aggregated some data outside their norm from different restaurants, attractions, and destinations, and focusing on what their future budget plans look like. So this is kind of just a snapshot of how the tourism industry, the revenues are going to change, and what people are forecasting for things, how to end for the year. So yes, it is extremely bleak for April if you're looking at this, but this is really kind of a thermometer, if you will, to how to, focus your revenues and how to, budget accordingly for your revenues. Obviously, Eric, they've been ahead of it, and I know we talked last week about everything, and they're going over everything this morning. Kudos to you and the rest of the city for already thinking ahead, because there's a lot of destinations who are still, we know, scrambling and trying to figure out where they're going to end up for the year, and how they're going to continue to function. And then I don't even, was it yesterday, Cam? I think you sent out the alert that even the Visit Kansas City staff had some furloughs and layoffs. So a lot of people are still being affected across our industry from the destination marketing standpoint. And there's a lot of those bigger destinations that have had some serious cuts to their staff. So take this just kind of as a little anecdote of where we're going to be. I know this is a lot to go over between the profile study and this, but this is kind of just a snapshot of everything that we're seeing right now. So happy to entertain any questions from you guys.
Oh, hey, Ryan, where do we stand with the visitor guide then?
Ken, did you put that in the?
Yeah, the visitor guide is done.
We have them. They are in our office. We have been sending them out as people are requesting them, which is really turned up in the last couple weeks. And then as soon as the stay-at-home order is lifted, we will be getting those out to, all of our stakeholders in the community. CTM already has them, and they are ready to roll out to the hotels as well.
So is there a target date, or we're just waiting for the order to get lifted?
When the order's lifted, because we can't really send our staff out until that happens.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Christy.
Well, thank you guys for the time this morning. I wish it was in person.
Yeah, we all wish we could get together, but anyway. Any other questions for Ryan, Kim, anybody with Madden? Thanks for all your effort. That's great, helpful information. It's always never fun to be the bearer of bad news, but having information is always great to at least give us something to look forward to when we see some trends. So thank you. All right. Were there reports in this package, Anna, that we were supposed to see?
Just the transient guest tax report from the Tourism Commission. Everybody's reports were basically in that one report that was in the packet.
Okay.
That will go to council.
Eric, has anybody, does that report just go to the council, or did you present it to the council, or is that all on hold because of the current situation?
Well, it's just going to go as information only at this point, so it will be sent to each of them. There won't be any formal presentation this time around. But what we do need today, Jim, if you could, is to talk through that a little bit and hopefully get consensus from you all that presentation is ready to go forward.
Has everybody had a chance to read that report? It's a concise consolidation. Most of us are familiar with it anyway. Does anybody have any thoughts on it? Any comment? It's a good synopsis of a lot of what we've gone over today, and unfortunately, it's not as terrific as things have been in the past. But I do think it accurately represents what's going on. So, comments from anybody? Guess I'll take that there is none. Do we need like a vote or anything, Eric? You want an endorsement or?
Hearing no objections here just a second ago, I will take that as endorsement.
I think that's safe to do. Any objections from anybody? Because
No, that's fine.
Okay, very good. We'll go forward to that. Any other information for today's meeting?
Jim, I was going to say that the video that Eric was referring to,
Yes.
that Madden did, there's a hyperlink in that presentation or the council presentation to that video. So if anybody wants to watch it, they can just watch it from that document.
Okay, and that hyperlink is where?
Where do we find that?
You should just be able to click on the image and it should go to, it should be a hyperlink.
Okay. Which image? I'm sorry.
The image of the video.
Got it. No, I don't have it.
It's
Yep,
on
got it.
page 4.
Yep, it's got the wagon there. Yeah, okay. Yep, got it. Just click on that and we can all watch it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Any other information for today's meeting?
And before we go, Jim, I just want to do have a virtual round of applause for Anna Delgado for being able to pull this meeting off and bring everybody together.
Yep.
Yay, Anna.
Yep. Also, closing comment here from the chair is to Eric, to you and the staff. You guys have put in an incredible amount of work. This is no fun working at home, obviously. It's a different adventure for all of us. But no, I know that you folks have been putting in an inordinate amount of effort behind the scenes, and thank you for that, for the job that you and the team do, and keeping us informed and the information. While it may not be the best, at least information is very helpful to all of us. So, and to all my colleagues on the commission, can't wait till we can all get together and see each other face to face. So. Anything else for the good of the order today? None appearing. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Sam's moved. Second.
Second.
We've got a second from, was Michelle? Who was it?
Chris.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
I'll take an aye. Great. We'll take that as in the affirmative. Meeting is closed here at about 20 minutes of 10. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.